All right. Hello, everyone. First of all, let's do a quick check. Can everyone see and hear me okay? Drop into the chat. Just give us a little hi and hello. Yes, there we go. And you were so fast on saying hi and yes. Well, welcome, welcome. It's so nice to have you here. We've got a great turnout today. Look at this, 300 of us here, ready to learn more about our money and have a good chat. I love it. And already super active in the chat as well. Keep staying active in that chat as we go because it's so nice to make this a good two-way conversation. I'll keep an eye on your comments to make sure everything's going well as we go here today. But first of all, welcome to this webinar, Taking Action, Women on the Path to Financial Success. We are going to absolutely crank through your questions in celebration of International Women's Day. The theme this year is Accelerate Action, which is all about the urgency of making faster, more effective strides towards gender equality. So I absolutely love that we're talking money because knowledge is power. Financial freedom is power, and we have just the team of wonderful panelists to help you become empowered. Now, I am Frances Cook. I'm an author and independent financial journalist. I will be running this panel for you today, and I am alongside some fantastic, very knowledgeable women who I will be introducing you to in just a second. Before we get into that, though, we do have to get the serious stuff out of the way. This disclaimer, of course, this presentation is for informational purposes only. We can't say that this is intended as a substitute for regulated financial advice because, of course, it is not. So do remember that we're stating everything as accurately as we can. Myself, the panelists, we can't have any liability, unfortunately, because this is just a general chat about money, the general rules of the game. So, who are these wonderful panelists? Well, first up, Hannah McQueen, financial strategist and founder of Enable Me, who has been described as a financial force of nature. Agree. Hannah has helped thousands of Kiwis to take control of their finances, pay off their mortgages faster, and build long-term wealth. A chartered accountant, financial advisor, best-selling author, media commentator. My goodness, what doesn't she do? Hannah is known for making complex financial topics simple, relatable, and actionable. So, hello, Hannah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And then, of course, Stephanie Powell, founder and CEO of Crayon. Now, Stephanie is the driving force behind Crayon, a platform dedicated to reducing financial stress and one of life's most pivotal moments, parenthood. Best known for launching the New Zealand Parental Leave Register, she helps individuals and organisations navigate the financial complexities of starting a family, which certainly is a tricky one. So thank you very much for joining us, Stephanie. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Last but never least, Alex Chadwick, Deputy Chief Executive of the Public Service Commission. With a background in employment law and workforce strategy, Alex has played a pivotal role in closing the public service gender pay gap and advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in workplaces across New Zealand. She currently leads workforce initiatives at the Public Service Commission and serves on the board of Diversity Works New Zealand. So, welcome, Alex. What a wonderful panel we've got.
Got it. Good to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you all here. Now, I've got to say, when I was looking through the questions that were submitted ahead of this panel, a really wide range. So, thank you very much to everyone who's tuning in, who has sent through their questions. Big themes, I think, in what people want to know around things like investing, negotiating your pay, figuring out your earning potential. So we've really focused in on those areas. We're going to include some other things as and when we can. Um, Alex, we will start with you. Career, obviously very important. It helps you earn more so that you can do all the rest of these fun financial things like investing. And a few questions on this. One question who they really honed into it said they wanted to learn some steps for feeling more secure in a changing career landscape. Now, that's a difficult one, isn't it? What can you do to protect your career, feel more secure in it, when there is a lot of change and it's a rather difficult economy at the moment?
Yeah, I agree. That's a really difficult question. It's a really challenging fiscal environment at the moment, and many people have unfortunately lost their jobs, particularly in the public sector where I work. And the job market is, of course, extremely competitive. So I think it's important to acknowledge that, and that some things are just out of our control because of those environmental factors. But I think that there are some things that are within our control, and which we can do to try and build that sense of security, and feeling established in the roles that we're in, and looking for our next opportunities. One of the first things I'd say is really to focus on making yourself indispensable. Do the basics of your job really well, but actually seek out opportunities to add value in your organizations, to your teams, utilize all of those skills that you've got, and be willing to go that extra mile. Another thing I'd sort of encourage everyone to do actually is to take responsibility for their own learning and development. Employers do have a role in this, but ultimately it's up to you. Seize those opportunities to learn and develop new skills. And I'm not talking about paying for expensive courses. I'm talking about learning on the job, learning from others, putting your hand up to try new things. So be constantly open to learn and grow your skills. And then I think the final thing I would say is to build your networks, and seek out advice. Start within your organization, but don't be afraid to go outside it. Look at people who you admire, who you respect, who you'd like to learn from. Ask someone to go for a coffee. You never know when you might learn something from someone, or you might be able to call on those contacts for support or advice in the future.
Yeah, and I want to pick up what you said there about, taking control of your own skills and your own career development, because I think that is really important. Yes, it's good if you have a boss who helps you with those things. That can be wonderful. But at the end of the day, it often does come down to taking charge of your career for yourself and pushing it forwards. If someone's looking for some of those learning and development opportunities, what can that look like in reality? What are some concrete things they can be looking for?
Well, I think it's always helpful to know where you want to be and to think ahead and plan for that. But I mean, I think you start by looking around you. I mean, if you're in a job, you can always learn something. It might not be your dream job, it might not be the job that you envisage yourself being in forever, but there are always opportunities to learn and build skills. And so I think that it's about starting. Looking around you for what you can learn, and just being really interested and curious about opportunities, and sort of seeking out where you can get involved and learn new things. And then that will slowly build. And I think then you can look at more where you see you've got strengths and things that you're interested in, and pursue those opportunities. But there's an opportunity in everything. So that's kind of where I would start.
Yeah. And when you're planning out your career, I mean, you always want to try to be smart, I think, about both enjoying it and getting paid well. If you can get both, the dream, right? But it's always a little bit of a balance, I think. Are there steps you recommend people take in terms of how they look forward and start planning that out?
Absolutely. I think pay is a really important, obviously, part of a job. It's why we work ultimately for enjoyment, but also and fulfillment, but also for pay. And I think there are a number of things that we can do to ensure that we are being paid what we're worth. And often people ask, is it possible to get fair pay in an organisation, particularly if you're at a junior kind of level? And I believe it absolutely is. But I know very much that it's not the case for everyone, especially women. And how do we know that? We know because we still have a gender pay gap in New Zealand. It's currently 8.2%. And pay gaps are an indicator of inequality. And since 2018, I've been, leading action in the public service to reduce the public service gender pay gap. And in that time, we've actually reduced it by half, down from 12.2% to 6.1%. And it does show you that that's possible with concerted action. But there is still so much work to do. Women are still, on average, paid less than men in every single ethnic grouping. So often I talk to women about what they can do individually, but also what they can do collectively within their own organisations to ensure that actually people are paid fairly. And one of the first things that women can do is to ask their organisation, do we have a gender pay gap? You know, do we have one at the organisational level? Do we have one at different levels of our organisation? And if there is one, what are we doing about it? Encouraging your employer to actually take some steps and volunteer to be involved in that work. There are some great free resources out there. The Ministry for Women has a fabulous toolkit for the private sector as well on tackling gender pay gaps. The Public Service Commission, where I work, has some guidance on our website about the things that you can do to tackle those drivers of gender pay gaps. So there is definitely possible to overcome this equality and to achieve fair pay. And then, of course, there are things that you can do individually, which we might come on to talk about later, about what you can do yourself if you think that you want to ask for a pay rise, which is always a daunting thing, but there are things you can do there too.
Yeah, I think it is. That's the issue of confidence does come up that we will be talking about a little bit later. When that shift that you got in terms of the percentages there is really impressive, bringing it down by half. What do you think moved the dial in your campaign, and what can women who are watching this and maybe operating by themselves learn from that and maybe put into action for themselves?
One of the key things was visibility of the data. So understanding where we had a problem and then understanding what was causing it. And it was slightly different in different organisations. But in some cases, it was starting salaries. You know, you're importing bias into an organisation right from the beginning because you're asking women what they're currently being paid and then offering them something in that vicinity when actually that shouldn't have any relevance. It should be assessed in terms of the job that they're going to be doing in your organisation and with the skill set that they bring to that. So, you know, we've looked at tackling it at all stages of the employment life cycle, from recruitment right through to remuneration reviews, through into promotions. You know, at every step, there's the possibility of bias and discrimination creeping in. And so it's about organisations really honing in on that and doing lots of things to ensure that there's balanced views, that there aren't single decision makers, that you've got good representation of women at the table. Lots of things that can be done that have made a real difference. But I think the number one thing is being transparent. We require all government agencies to report their gender pay gaps and also publish plans which tell the world what they're doing about them.
Yeah. Interesting question from the chat here, and I don't know if this is part of your expertise. Do just tell me if you don't know. But they said, is the gender pay gap greater in non-profits? Do you know? Do you have any data on that?
I don't have the data to my fingertips. We might be able to have some of that data, and we might collect some of it, but I don't have it at this stage. I don't know. It could be. You know, it just depends. We have to have a look at that.
No worries. I'd be very interested if that ever did come up. Excuse me, Stephanie. Another question that I thought was really interesting, and very of the times, they said starting a family seems quite difficult when the cost of everything is just so high. That's their words, and I still identify with that feeling. And they just want to know how people do it. I mean, to be honest, the answer is sometimes with difficulty, right?
Yes, and that I think for more and more people, it is with difficulty. Just I want to take a 10,000 foot view first. So actually AMP did a survey across the ditch in Australia, and they found that 71% of expecting parents are financially stressed. And I think it's probably pretty similar on this side of the Tasman. To give you where New Zealand sits in the global landscape, in terms of paid primary care leave entitlements from the government, we are in the bottom quartile for developed countries. We are one of 3 developed countries to have no paid partners leave, and we also have some of the least affordable childcare in the world. So if you're sitting there and thinking, the maths doesn't maths for me, you're not alone. I think that's probably why I share that global context to say it is difficult for a growing number of New Zealanders. And I'm sure Hannah sees it in her line of work. You know, more and more families need 2 incomes to kind of make their lives run. Having said that, I think the question was, well, what can you do about it, or how are people making it work? I think the first is to look into your entitlements early, even if you're in the maybe baby category and you're not sure. One of the things we do at Crayon is we have the New Zealand Parental Leave Register. We have over 330 verified employer parental leave policies on there. You can go see importantly, what the benefits are, but also what the T's and C's are. How long do you need to be at an organization to qualify for their benefits? Is there any clawback? So some organizations, if you don't return after parental leave, you're on the hook for the money. What are the other ways besides financial that they support new parents, both what we call primary carers and partners? So look into that early. If you're switching jobs, this is something that if having a child is on your radar, you want to know what you're signing up for, because often there will be a 6-12 month qualifying time. Also know what you're going to or potentially be eligible for from the statutory entitlements on the government website. We have a lot of that on our website. You can also go to IRD and Employment New Zealand. And again, you mentioned the term rules of the game at the top of this discussion. You do need to know what the rules are so that you make sure you're eligible for that time off and the money off that you want. So that would be one, is know what your entitlements are. Also look at what other support is available. Working for families is a tax credit, a family of tax credits available from the IRD. WIN sometimes has some support depending on your circumstances. Family Boost is a new childcare subsidy. So I think it's kind of making sure you squeeze the most out of that lemon that you can get. And then on the flip side is thinking about that cost of a child. And that can vary a lot. We help couples plan this out. But in general, in New Zealand, that can range anywhere from around kind of 8,000 at the lower end up to about 20,000 just in that first year. And a lot of that depends on childcare costs, etc. So I think getting into that planning phase, because it is a significant time to take out of the workforce, is really crucial.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, what sort of things can people ask for from their employer? Are there ways that you can get a bit more support with this?
Yeah, so the first and most obvious one would be paid parental leave entitlements, and at least having the conversation. It might be, how do we support new parents in our organization, or what can that look like? And certainly more and more employers have policies in this space. I also see sometimes where an employer for a valued employee will do something discretionary or one-off. And so I think it's a conversation at least to be had. The other ways we see employers help employees or financially, KiwiSaver. So I know we're going to probably touch on this a bit later, but some employers will make additional KiwiSaver contributions. Annual leave, how that's impacted. So there's a bit of a quirk, I would call it, in the legislation, but when you come back from taking parental leave, your annual leave can be devalued. And so it might be that your employer honors what they would pay you normally. That could be a way to support you financially. Flexibility. We're seeing some employers now do not just let you do reduced hours on the way back in, but reduce the financial impact of that. So it might be you can work 80% of your normal hours, but still be paid 100% for a period of time. It's a defined period just to help with that ramp up, etc. So I think there are different ways an employer can support an employee if paid leave isn't an option. And I certainly understand that from as a business owner myself, but also as a small to medium enterprise, it's not always that feasible, but there are different ways. And if you go on the register, you can, once you start to look at a few profiles, you'll see actually there's what I would call a long tail of benefits. I've seen employers give meal boxes, diapers, all sorts of ways that they can support.
Love that. Okay, what about the flip side? Are there fish hooks that can catch many people out? Just a place maybe to double check the terms and conditions.
Yes. So one is make sure you qualify. A lot of employers will specify that to benefit from their policy, you need to be a permanent employee, and they'll sometimes even specify if you're permanent part-time minimum number of hours. That's rare, but it can happen. The other one is length of service. So do you need to be there? Some employers make it available the day you join. Others will have 6 months, 12 months. I've seen 24 months at the outside. The government entitlements also have rules. So you need to have worked any of the 26 weeks in the 52 weeks before your due date or your placement date. And so for at least 10 hours a week on average. So there's that. And then you also need to have been at your current employer for at least 6 months to get 6 months of parental leave, and 12 months to get 12 months of parental leave. So you can actually be in a position where you're entitled to the money, but not the time off, which is a bit of an unusual one. And so knowing what those rules are, the clawbacks that I mentioned, what if you decide not to go back? Things can change after you have a baby. Are you going to be on the hook for paying some or all of that back? And what does that look like? The other way we see parents get caught out are secondary tax rates. So if you are in a good position of getting an employer benefit and the government entitlements, if you receive more than one income stream at a time, the IRD has on their website that you should ideally apply a secondary tax rate. So we do get parents writing in that they didn't, and they end up with a tax bill of a few $1,000s at a time that you don't really have a lot of spare cash. And then the last way I'll mention is working for families tax credit. It can provide additional financial support to your family. It's based on how much you and your partner, if you have one, estimate you will earn in a 12-month period. So we do see situations where a lot of people end up with working for families bills as a correction at the end of financial year because they say underestimated, or they told the IRD that they were going to earn as a family, let's call it 80,000, but they actually earn 100,000. And so the IRD does a wash up and they come knocking. And there was a headline the other day, I saw someone owed 45,000, and that must be very unusual. But still, even getting a couple of $1,000s is just, it really stings. So they're kind of the areas or pitfalls that we can see.
Definitely don't want that $45,000 bill.
Oh,
I don't
really
think anyone would be happy
parent.
with that. All right, thank you for that. It's definitely an amazing list of things to check out. Hannah, once people have got these sorts of things sorted, I know a lot of people are very interested in investing for starters, but saving, investing for your child's future. I mean, are there options that can be better when you're thinking about these things? You're looking at how to future-proof for yourself, but you're probably also, if you're in this mindset, thinking for your kids, right? Are there good options there?
Yeah, there are. And if I may just segue slightly, Frances, I just want to round out the gender pay gap and
Yeah,
some
sure.
practical tips that I give the clients that I'm working with and how they can close that. Because without a doubt, what Alex was saying is true. Often there is a starting bias that you've started on a lower salary and then you're getting kind of incremental lifts, but because you started lower, you never quite get to the comparisons, and it's not fair. And I could sit on a soapbox about how ridiculous that is, and I have negotiated. I have tried to explain how unfair it is to my 16-year-old son, and he's not buying it, right? And so, what I find with females in particular is we are not good at asking for a pay rise. We are not good at negotiating for a pay rise, and we tend to suffer from imposter syndrome. Now, that tends to create a lack of confidence at the table. And if you're going to negotiate, you've got to be able to hold your line, right? You need to be able to know what you bring to the table, and you're prepared to push back if what you get as a first offer isn't acceptable to you. Now, your ability to push back is impacted by the strength of your own financial situation. If you have sufficient resilience, you can be a little more argy-bargy in that negotiation, right? You don't take the first offer. But if you are on the brink financially, you're just going to take what you're given. Of course you are, because you don't want to jeopardize your own household with a fight you're prepared to do for another day, right? So I do think that your financial capability and resilience and your ability or your confidence has a huge impact in what you get paid. And I do think that females are weak in those areas. And if we are going to invest in ourselves, invest in your ability to negotiate, invest in your ability to ask. I do find that females don't ask enough. It's almost like we're too empathetic. We consider it from the other perspective, and we're like, oh, we won't ask for certain reasons. And it's kind, but it's not commercial. And I'll give you a silly example, but just to illustrate my terrorist of a 16-year-old. He had a work apprenticeship, and he was getting, before he got accepted into the apprenticeship, he had to do work experience. And I was so grateful for the organization, or he's training to be a builder, that would give him time. Like, he knows nothing about anything, right? And they're prepared to give him work experience. And I thought, this is amazing. And after the first, and he did a good job, and blah, he did it for, I don't know, 8 weeks over the holidays. And after the first week, he said, I'm going to ask to be paid. And I'm like, I don't think you can. I think they're doing you a solid here. Like, just be grateful that they're even taking you on. They could have taken another student on. This is me coming at it from a business owner, thinking about them as a business owner. And Cam said, no, I'm just going to ask. And then he comes home that day and he goes, they're paying me $25 cash an hour. I'm like, what the heck? That's the equivalent of a $70,000 salary. And I'm thinking, you asked. You were cheeky enough to ask. And I was offended. I was embarrassed as his parent. but he asks. And sometimes I think you've got to surround yourself with the people who will teach you to ask in a way that you feel comfortable, because you've got to feel comfortable about how you do it, but you got to ask, babe. You got to ask for it. And if we take nothing else, it's okay to request more than the first offer. I'm not saying you're going to trump it, but you can ask for more. And I think as females, we never ask for enough. That's my little pep talk to the girls in the room. Now back to what do you do if you're going to invest? Well, investing means different things depending on how much money you've got and what you need the investment to do. If I'm thinking about investing for my kids, and this week I'm thinking of disowning them, so I'm sort of not really thinking about the investment for them. But if I was going to think about investing for them, I would be wanting to and have bought investment properties that I haven't told them about. And the top up I pay on that investment property each week is the equivalent to what some parents would just put into a savings account for their kids or into a KiwiSaver account. I prefer that because the money is working 3 to 5 times harder. I don't like investing in KiwiSaver accounts for our kids because they don't get access to that money until they buy a home or until they're 65. And I think for this generation of kids coming through, I don't think buying your home as your first investment is the smartest thing to do. And I think you could get the money working harder. But if you don't have enough money, that's assuming you've got equity, right? And not all of us have equity. Some of us are at a standing start, or we should be further along, but we're not. Well, we've got to start to save. And as a target, you need to be saving 20% of your income. And if you can't get to that level, you either need to cut your spending or you need to earn more money. And that's when you've got to think about, back to the career, back to Alex's valid point that your biggest asset is you. Yeah, that is the biggest asset. What are you doing to drive your value? And if the industry you're working in is coming to a close, well, then we've got to work out, how do we move you through? What are the skills you need to transfer, and what are the skills you need to learn? And yes, it is an uncertain time. I get that, but we have to be able to thrive in uncertainty. That's what anti-fragile means. And I think that females do that in every area of their life, apart from the areas we are weakest in thriving is in our career development and in our financial situation, right? So let's kind of put some energy around that. So the first thing is we've got to get you saving. If you've got a mortgage, we want to get you mortgage free in 10 years. And if you are saving 20% of your income, the impact of that, if you channel that saving into your mortgages, you can be mortgage free in 10 years. But for most of us, even if we then started saving for retirement and added our KiwiSaver in, that's not going to be enough to fund our retirement. So we've got to work out, okay, how hard does this money need to work that we need to build? And that will tell us the type of investment that is appropriate, whether it's managed funds, whether it's investment property, whether it's art, crypto. You know, I can go wide if you want me to go wide, but we've got to solve the problem first, and the problem is different for each situation depending on the milestone your household is at financially.
Yeah, love that. I mean, if someone is interested in that investing, like you say, there is a wide range of things that are possible. And whether it's for yourself or your kids, I mean, getting started, I think, is the hard bit often. What are some good places to start? Where would you say people should at least be investigating?
Well, earlier I was talking about the kind of the weaknesses that we tend to share as females. And one thing that I think females are amazing at, so much better than guys, and I think on the whole, I think we are better than guys, but one thing I think we excel at is self-awareness. We know who we are and we know what we're not. And we don't need to pretend after that, because from a financial perspective, knowing who you are and what you're not is one of the most important things in setting your financial strategy. So if you are a shopper, which I am, telling me to save isn't going to be effective. I'm not interested. I get the logic. I mean, I'm trained in the logic. It just doesn't float my boat. For me, I need to focus on growing wealth. That excites me. If I was a saver, growing wealth would freak you out. You actually just want to save, and the idea of spending is uncomfortable to you. So we've got a different strategy depending on who you are and what you're not. Another thing is, what's your risk tolerance? Some people like to be adventurous and quite bold in their financial decisions, and other people don't. And some people just want to drift. But knowing who you are helps determine the strategy that's going to be the most effective for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Now, you mentioned earlier about the mortgage. You've spent a lot of time helping people pay off the mortgage faster. It is one of your specialties. Many questions came through asking about how you pay off the mortgage faster. They're a bit stressed by interest rates currently, and also how you balance paying off the mortgage versus building wealth in other ways in terms of investments. What are your thoughts on that? So I'll break that down because I've scattergunned you there. Paying off the mortgage faster, what's your best tip? And then how do you balance that with things like building wealth through investing?
Okay, so paying off your mortgage faster comes down to two things predominantly. You have to maximize your cash surplus, which is saving more, and you need to structure your mortgage so that you can repay it without being penalized. Normally, that means you have to have a component of the mortgage that is on a revolving credit facility that you can re-access the progress that you are making. But again, you've got to know yourself. Don't give yourself EFTPOS access to that facility. That's the fastest way to go nowhere. So that's the two things. From an interest rate environment at the moment, you'd be starting to think about fixing for 2 to 3 years. Basically, if rates get below 4%, you should be fixing for as long as you can as a general rule of thumb. Now, back to what was the second question? Sorry, Francis?
How you balance paying off the mortgage and then goals like building wealth.
Yeah, so I like to do both simultaneously. So one of the reasons why I don't increase my repayments to the bank, if I'm my fixed repayments, I channel it through repaying an overdraft facility so I can re-access it. If I'm paying off the mortgage and growing wealth at the same time, I am going to draw down on that revolving credit facility as a deposit for my next investment. Now, typically, I would lean towards property because that outperforms other investments by around 300%, but that's not appropriate for everyone. But I want to do both at the same time. It's not until I have closed my retirement gap and I know I'm going to have enough money in time with what I've got now, if I hold on to it, it's at that point that I consider divesting into other asset classes. I think one of our weaknesses is we try to divest first before we've actually solved the problem, which is growing the wealth to be big enough so that you can divest after that.
All right.
Diversify, beg your pardon, diversify.
Yeah. So you would focus on one at a time?
Oh, well, I normally do them 3 months apart. So if I'm working with someone over a course of a year, I'll say, look, for the first quarter, I'm going to get you lean. I'm going to put you through your paces and we're going to actually lift the savings rate. But I'm going to link it to something that you are really energized by so you don't hate me. That's going to be the first thing, is getting the mortgage on track to be paid off, say, in 7 years rather than 23 years. And so then quarter 2 is about focusing on that mortgage coming down at the pace that I expect it to. And then quarter 3 is saying, okay, you've locked in that foundation. Now we're going to leverage on that. We're going to build on that, and we're going to overlay an investment strategy. And for most of us, I would say we're almost putting all 3 strategies happening both at the same time, although there's kind of a couple of months before we start the next one.
Love that. Love that. And I just want to do a shout out to the mums in the chat because we've had a commenter who said their mum taught them to save, forced that onto her. Mum also invested in shares. Today, I'm ever so grateful to her. Shout out to the mums who have these conversations and get you starting thinking about money when you're quite young. It can be huge, that. And on that, I mean, let's move to a bit of a personal answer on this one because I'm going to run through everyone on the panel to give an answer on this. Several questions came through along the theme of just feeling like you're managing your money well, reducing stress, feeling like it's under control, not too much debt, able to support people in life that you care about. You know, for some people it's their kids, for other people it's their parents, but that feeling of not just spinning your wheels, feeling like you're on a path, feeling good about things. So we'll start with you, Stephanie. Is there anything in your life that's helped you feel more under control with your money in general? And what's a top tip there that you would share with other people?
So for me, this is actually going to be quite boring, but I think it's looking at the structure of my accounts and the flows between the accounts. So I used to think, oh, if I have to manage my money, I've got to be in spreadsheets and going through statements and all of that rather joyless, at least for me, type of work. But actually, one of the things we work a lot with expecting parents on, but I've done myself, is taking a step back. Often when you think about the way your bank accounts are structured, it just kind of evolved over time. Maybe you met someone, you set up this account, but most people have not sat down and thought about, well, what accounts do I have? What buckets of money do I need? Do I need to separate out my fun spending from, the bills and the must pay type of spending? I personally think a good money system for someone should work almost on autopilot, obviously with a bit of oversight, but automation is a big part of that. Having the right buckets and having the money move between those buckets when they should can take a lot of that stress out. If we need to choose between saving and spending, our human brains, I know we've been around how many thousands of years, the concept of retirement has been around for maybe 100 years. So this idea that we need to save for some distant future, we used to, frankly, humans used to work and then they died, right? Or they, this idea that we're going to sail into the sunset and live another, 20 years, etc. That's fairly new, and our brains take quite a long time to evolve. So I think once you acknowledge that actually it's not that I'm a bad saver or I'm not good at this, but just that I am not, or humans are not programmed for this. So how can I put structures in place that help me kind of reduce some of the need and the decision fatigue that comes with managing my money? So a big one would be just sitting down, even a simple thing like separating out fun money from must pay money. It sounds very simple, but for me, I want to be able to go enjoy life. I want to be able to spend on the things I care about guilt-free and not worry about paying the bills. So I think in understanding what those buckets are, I have automated investments going in for my kids, and I have done since they're about 1 or 2, and I chuck in birthday money, and then just something every month ticks in. And I just checked it the other day, and it's starting to build up, and it will be quite meaningful. My kids are still quite young; they're 5 and 3. So I think that automation part and buckets part is very boring, but has been game changing for me.
Yeah, no, I don't necessarily know that it's even that boring. It's such a game changer when you hit a system that helps you feel stress-free and more in control. That is just it's one of the secrets to life, and I do love automation, sorry, to help with that. It's just so important. Alex, what about you? Is there something you've used in your life to help you feel more in control?
Well, I think one of the big things for me was getting financially literate. I mean, maths was never my strong point at school. It was the subject that I hated the most. And I thought, when am I ever going to use this? But I have actually become quite financially literate over the years, understanding, how to use my money to work for me, understanding all the different mortgages we might have and, those sorts of things. So educating yourself on the basics and understanding how to make your money work for you, I think is a really important thing that everyone should know. Recent experience of losing my father-in-law and realizing that my mother-in-law had absolutely no idea, even the password or how to access her bank account, just, beggars belief. So I think, one of the biggest things that I would recommend is just understanding, your finances and where your money is going. And actually, as we were talking about this, I was thinking back, this is touching on with the example of Just Ask. So when I started out as my first job as a law clerk in one of the big firms, I was perpetually in overdraft, constantly in overdraft, never got out of it. But I actually had a coffee with a male colleague of mine who was doing exactly the same job as me. We had the same qualification. He was a little bit older, but not much, same qualification, same skills, doing the same job. And I remember complaining about the fact that I was in overdraft the entire time and couldn't get out of it. And he said to me, yeah, but our salaries aren't that bad. And we got talking about what our salaries were, and he was earning $20,000 more than me. And I asked him, how did that happen? And the answer was, I just asked.
Yeah.
So again, coming back to Hannah's point, another thing that has helped me feel more under control with my money, not only becoming more financially literate, understanding where my money goes, but I also have negotiated my salary in various roles.
That's so important, isn't it? That asking, just crucial. Hannah, what are your thoughts on this? What's something that's helped you feel more in control?
I think goal setting, knowing where you want to be in the next 5 years and the next 10 years. I think too often we're only thinking kind of 5 weeks out or 5 months out. And I think when you can see further ahead, you can expect more for yourself and you can hope for more. so I tend to be sort of a naturally ambitious goal setting kind of person, because I kind of think, well, what's the point unless it's going to be something that I'm proud of. But once I've got that goal, irrespective of what it is, if I'm serious about it, I will always partner with someone to keep me accountable and to help set the milestones to break that down. And I'll give you an example. So if I want to run a marathon, I've got a running coach. Initially, it was to help me actually run a marathon, and now it's to help me run a marathon in a particular time, right? So they're independent, kind of just not buying my BS when I give the reason why I haven't done anything and kind of putting me in my places, or when I know I've got a tough week, they kind of can rework my regime around other stuff so that I'm more likely to do it. That's invaluable to me because I'm committed to it, but often it's the time that prevents these things and exhaustion. If I'm wanting to get fit, I also have if I'm wanting to eat better, I have someone who I'm accountable to, like a dietitian. Or from a financial perspective, I mean, I've designed Enable Me, but I still meet with my financial coach. And that's because accountability is because most of us are natural obligers, which means we naturally put everyone else ahead of our own personal goals, which usually makes us a female, because it seems to be a prevalent trait. But I think accountability helps kind of elevate your goals to be in line with other objective goals that aren't for your own immediate benefit. So for me, that's the way of getting things done, is to introduce accountability. But if you don't know where you're going and if it doesn't excite you, that's a problem. And what I've noticed with a lot of, not even females, but households in New Zealand, is we're not particularly good at setting financial goals. We don't really know what to aim for. And in the absence of that, we think, well, we just won't be bad with money. That sort of is the default. And the difference between not being bad with money and directing effort in a particular direction instead of drifting to an outcome, that difference over a 10-year period for most households could be close to $1 million of difference. It is huge. And that is the compounded impact of lost savings that aren't put towards the mortgage to get you mortgage free faster. So you're then not saving interest on your mortgage, and you haven't created equity that you could reinvest somewhere else to get capital growth. Those three things on average create $1 million for most households. And most people they kind of say, well, I'm not bad with money, so how can I be much better? It is about compounded small changes creates enormous results. But if your situation is, hey, look, we don't even want to think about thriving, we need to survive, well, then your approach has to be very tactical. That's where you're paying attention to where the money's going, as Stephanie said. You're making sure that you're not overspending and you're kind of fighting for every dollar for it to stretch as far as possible. But if you're surviving now, your goal needs to be, I want to thrive within a particular period of time. And then what are we going to do to get you there? And that might be making some big decisions. And sometimes talking to someone independent is the way that you feel safe making those decisions. Sometimes with your partner, I was saying to my husband, I wanted to get fit. He gives me some suggestions and I'm offended that he's suggested anything, even though I've sort of welcomed it. And I think you've got to know who you need to hear it from for you to take it on board. Because I do think we're ready to take it on board, but who does it need to come from? Usually not your mum and usually not your partner. That's the fastest way to dismiss anything in my world. So who do you need to hear it from?
I love that, getting in the outside person just to protect those relationships with those who you just want the unconditional support from.
I'm not
a very quick question from the chat. Liz has asked, is a financial coach the same as a financial advisor?
No, a financial advisor, well, a financial coach can be a financial advisor. They're qualified to be a financial advisor, but a financial coach is normally focused on financial planning, whereas a financial advisor is looking at particular financial products to match to your situation. So normally before you get to the products, you've got to know, well, what's the problem I'm trying to solve and how much can I improve myself before we work out what are the products that are suitable. So a financial coach takes the holistic view of your situation, and then they will work out what products come after that.
Love it. Now, something that's come up quite a bit in terms of this conversation is the issue of confidence, right? Having the confidence to start on some of these changes, to do things like ask for more money, to take control of career finances. Alex, is this something that you've dealt with? What are some good strategies for dealing with this confidence to implement these changes, to have some of these hard conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. Confidence is a real tricky one, I think. I meet so many women who tell me, as soon as I feel a bit more confident, I'm going to ask for that pay rise, or I'm going to buy that house, or I'm going to go for the job that I want. And in my personal view, it's a little bit back to front. So, confidence, I think, is developed from actually just going ahead and doing the thing,
Yeah.
experiencing it, and coming out the other side, hopefully with a positive result. Doesn't always happen, but once you've done it once, and particularly if it goes well, it'll give you that little bit of confidence the next time you do it. I'm always amazed by these, seminars that people can go on to build confidence, but I actually think, take the step, do the thing, and the confidence will follow. So that's, if you can take anything from it, I think sometimes you just have to do it. It's going to feel scary, but just, go get on with it. If it comes to sort of things like asking for a pay rise, certainly there are things that I would do and there are things that I wouldn't do, and there are some strategies that you can employ to help you do that. Confidence is one of the things I'd say that, is not a prerequisite, because I think everyone feels when the first time they're going to ask for a pay rise, nervous. It's just normal. It's just normal human behavior. But there are some things you can do. So, for example, get your timing right. Time it with your annual performance review, or the time when that kind of conversation is happening in your organization. You're less likely to get a receptive ear if the review period is over, budgets have been set and closed for the year. So think about your timing. I'd also say think about the person that's receiving this information. So think about your boss. Tell your boss you'd like to have a conversation about your pay. Don't make it a secret, and make a time to do that. So it's actual proper conversation where you're going to sit down and talk about this. Do your research, understand the market for your particular role. That's really important. You want your expectations to be realistic, but you want some evidence to sort of back that up. And think about like what your reasoning is. So why do you deserve a pay increase? Think about what skills you're bringing to the role. What are the achievements you've had in that role? Where are you going, and what value are you adding? I mean, the cost of living comes up time and time again, but I don't think it's something you should be necessarily raising in a conversation where you're asking for a pay rise, nor is your personal circumstances. This is about how you're doing the job, what value you're adding, and the reasons why you deserve to be paid more. And don't forget some of those unique skills that you might bring that might not be just things that you've learned on the job or academic skills that you have. Women have fabulous skills from all over their lives, their communities, and I think it's something that women draw on all the time in the workplace, and those are not recognised. So important to raise those as well. And remember, it's a two-way conversation. It's a negotiation. Have in your mind a figure, do your homework, but also, as Hannah said, if you're in a position where you feel more stable, you can be a bit flexible on that. There's nothing worse than a negotiation that's a one-way thing where you've got a line in the sand and you're not prepared to move. I think you'll get a much more receptive outcome if you are willing to talk about it genuinely. So that would be kind of my sort of tips on strategies for asking for a pay rise. I'm sure Hannah will have others, but the confidence thing, it's a misnomer that you've got to be confident before anything will happen. Get confidence through doing and through experiencing, however scary that is initially.
Oh, I so agree with you. I could not agree with you more. I think confidence is one of those things that comes after you've proved to yourself you can do it. If you wait for the confidence to do it, you will probably be waiting forever. You take those first steps and it's terrifying, and then you realize you can do it, whether or not it works. You just realized you were capable of having that conversation. And then that is, it proves to you that you can do it, and that builds confidence in itself. Now we're gonna keep chatting. I do see Rachel has put into the chat, asking for a recommendation of books or tools that have helped shaped mindset towards money. So I'll just say we've got 400 women here today, which is fantastic. For anyone who's read a good book, I know Hannah's written several. But if you've read a good book that has helped you with your money, drop that into the chat. Let's share our tips and tricks with each other on this, or other tools that have helped you. Meanwhile, Stephanie, one of the big problems with the pay gap is its impact on KiwiSaver. Women live longer than men, and yet we often end up with less money in retirement, partly because of spending so many years out of the workforce. When it comes to having a family, there's usually at least some sort of impact there if you do have a family. So, Stephanie, anything we can do on that front to help us with the KiwiSaver gap?
Yes, you touched on that gender gap. So in New Zealand, the average KiwiSaver balance for women is 25% lower than it is for men. And the average, what we call contribution gap, so how much goes in, is about 36% lower for women. So it is very real. In terms of what you can do about it, from a policy perspective, so from the 1st of July last year, the government started making what we call matching employer contributions on paid parental leave. So the thing to know there is by default, KiwiSaver is not deducted from your government paid parental leave. So you need to actually tick the box when you apply. And if you do that, the government will also kick in. So if you do 3%, they'll kick in 3%. We worked out on if you're getting the maximum PPL amount, it's just shy of $1,000, right? So that's one thing you can do on parental leave. The other is to check your employer's policy. 1/3 of the employers on our register actually make a contribution equivalent to what you would have received over an entire year had you not taken parental leave. So there are a lot of employers doing more in this space, recognizing that the KiwiSaver gender gap exists. So that would be one, is check the policy. In terms of what else I see parents do, in contributions, at the end of the day, the only things that impact your KiwiSaver are how much you put in, what returns you earn on it, and when you access it, right? So if we think about what goes in, I've seen some parents have a conversation. Well, one person's essentially taking a financial hit to, taking one for the team, and taking meaningful amounts of time out of the paid workforce. Sometimes there'll be a discussion around, well, something from our family budget might go towards the primary carers KiwiSaver, making voluntary contributions, particularly to get the government matching credits that happen each year. So that's one, is what is that conversation with your partner? The second one that we see is I was lucky. I saw Amanda Morell, who some of you might know as a financial educator, talk when I was pregnant with my first child. And one of the things she said is, but talking about the KiwiSaver gender gap, increasing your KiwiSaver contribution rate. And because I heard her while I was pregnant, I actually upped my rate, and I was fortunate to be in a position where I could do that. But I upped my rate for the last 4 months of my pregnancy. So that's another thing I've seen some parents do, is increase their rate either before they go on parental leave or on their way back in. So that's, and recognizing not everybody is in that position to do that, but that's another way you can do it. And the last one would be just to look at what fund you're in. I think a lot of New Zealanders, if you ask them, aren't sure who their provider is or what their fund setting is. So yes, try and increase what you can put in, but also make that money work hard for you and make sure you're in the right fund for your fund type. And even going onto the government website, Sorted, has some free tools that can help you with that. The other thing I will say on this is, touching on the pay gap that both Alex and Hannah have raised, is often we see that exacerbated by parental leave. So you might miss out on a pay review because you're just about to go on leave, then you miss out on a review because you're on leave, and then you miss out on a review because you haven't been back at work long enough to have that. So again, having that proactive conversation of, okay, so how will pay reviews work while I'm on parental leave? What about any short-term incentives? Sometimes we'll see in policies that employers will give you a prorated amount, recognizing that you worked part of that year. So having that front footing, that conversation of how will it work with all these different aspects of my remuneration? What about that promotion or project that I'm going for? And there's a lot of evidence showing that once you become a mum, you're perceived as being less competent and less committed. So sometimes it's vocalizing that I still really want that job, or I still really want to do that project, because otherwise people will make assumptions for you. They might say, well, Steph just had a baby, that project involves a lot of travel. I'm sure she doesn't want to do that. So you don't get offered it at all, right? And you don't want to be in that position. So front footing some of that.
Yeah, that is the trick, isn't it? That people often will assume on your behalf, thinking they're being helpful.
Yeah.
And so you do have to, sometimes they won't even check in with you. You sometimes just have to do that, thinking ahead of what might be an issue. Hannah, we've only got a few minutes left, but I want to really quickly run this issue by you because we've talked a lot about families and women looking after other people around them. Very important issues for sure, but there's also the issue of the singles tax. For single women, it can be hard to do things on one income, saving for a house, really hard, starting to invest. You're not necessarily, part of a financial team. So sorry, this has to be quite quick, but if there's anything that single women can do to look after themselves when they're a financial team of one, what would you recommend there?
I think financially, being a financial team of one can be helpful, especially if you were otherwise going to be married to a financial dud. I mean, that's less helpful. I'd much rather be alone. So I don't think it's all bad, and I don't think men are a financial plan either. So what it means practically, though, is that your margin of error is smaller. The buck stops with you. You can't afford to take your time, and you can't afford to drift. That's what it means. I don't think the rigor of that is particularly challenging. I think it's probably can be a good thing, but we just need to understand what's the strategy that's going to work for you. Now, because you've only got one income, my hope is that your spending is aligned to that. And provided you can still save 20% of that income, we're good to go. We are good to go on buying property, a home for you if you don't have one, paying it off faster, or diversifying into other wealth options. So I don't think being single is a problem, but you don't have anyone to bail you out. And so that means that we have got to get a plan and we have to execute it well, clinically, one would say. We still need to understand what you need to be happy. And just because you're single doesn't mean you can't have your non-negotiables. They'll be probably more important to you. But the plan's just got to acknowledge that. And we work backwards from there. But I don't think being single is a problem. The strategy might be slightly different. It might be that if you're struggling to save a deposit, we might need to go in with someone else, a friend or family member for your first investment, and get the capital gain to then part ways, and then you're off. So there could be an intermediary step to fast track you if you don't have enough traction for yourself. But remember, just because you don't have enough traction for yourself just means we've got to work out a different strategy. It doesn't mean that you pause.
Yeah. Yeah, love that. Love that. Well, thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. That is all, unfortunately, that we have time for. But if you are looking to up your game in 2025, you will be sent a copy of this webinar. We've been recording it. And there's also a way to get in touch with the team if you're wanting to do that. There we go, up on screen there. So you can get in touch with the team if you're wanting more. I saw some people asking about things like financial coaching. Easily done. Until then, wonderful questions submitted by the audience today, great answers from the panel, all around a great time, or at least from my point of view. So thank you for tuning in. Big thank you to the panel for sharing their expertise. Hannah McQueen, Stephanie Powell, Alex Chadwick, loved your time, loved your answers, and everyone, have a great rest of your day.